chapter 2. Nehemiah chapter 2. And with permission granted, he then went to Jerusalem. But this was before he got the permission, because chapter 1 ended by saying that God grant me mercy. So what happened? And it came to pass, verse 1, and it came to pass in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was before him, that I took the wine and gave it to the king. Now, the month of Nisan, can you tell me which month is that in our calendar? March, April. Okay? Now, what is the significance here? When he first heard the news, it was November, December. And then, now it was March, April before he approached the king. So for 3 to 4 months, he was praying. He was seeking the Lord. He could have been fasting and other things, but he was preparing. He was praying for 3-4 months. Something to learn here. But sometimes you are so impulsive. You know, we trust in the Lord. We have confidence in the Lord, but we must also exercise wisdom. We must be as wise as serpents, right? Be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Matthew chapter 10 verse 16. And not chiong, just got the bad news and straight away go to the king. I must go. You must wait for time. And so, after 3-4 months, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was before him, that I took the wine and gave it to the king. Now, I had never been sad in his presence before. And the role of the cupbearer is not just to sample the drink and the food, but also to be his trusted advisor. And so, but you are not to come to him with a humching bang face, pour out your personal problems unto him, to the king. Because if the king has a bad day, you will end up in great trouble. So he was very careful. He was also a bit fearful. Therefore the king said to me, "Why is your face sad, since you are not sick? There is nothing but sorrow of heart." So I became dreadfully afraid. And it is okay. It is only human, right? So I became dreadfully afraid because he might be mistaken as being disloyal. Anyway, and he said to the king, "May the king live forever. Why should my face not be sad when the city, the place of my father's tombs, lies waste and its gates are burned with fire?" But he said the first thing. He pledged loyalty to the king. May the king live forever. You understand? Learn something. Okay? Then the king said to me, "What do you request?" Now we see. So I prayed to the God of heaven and I said to the king, it's not even one verse, no. It is shorter than one verse. He said, "So I prayed to the God of heaven and I said to the king." It must have been a very short prayer. And it must have been a silent prayer. You understand? First you look so sad, then the king asks you, "Why are you so sad?" He said, "Wait, I pray first. And come back to you." He must quickly, "Lord, thank you. Grant me mercy." Okay? So there is a place for long prayers and short prayers. But bottom line is, Nehemiah was a prayerful man, as I showed you just now on the slide. So I prayed to the God of heaven. And I said to the king, "If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, I ask that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's tombs, that I may rebuild it." You know what he was doing? He was applying for leave. Then the king said to me, The queen also sitting beside him. How long will your journey be? And when will you return? So it pleased the king to send me, and I set him a time. Did the king do any deliberation? Did the king go and say, let me think about it? No. The king just asked, how long will your journey be? Didn't say no. That means actually consent, implied consent, but just how long will you be? Yeah? And when will you come back? Because you are an important person to me. But you see, your Bible has got in parentheses the queen also sitting beside him. And you know, nothing is there in the Bible for fun, right? Just to fill the space. But the Bible did not say exactly what the queen did. But I'm sure the queen gave him a nudge. Okay, go. Okay. So, what I'm saying is, husband, you need a wife. Wife also, you need a husband. There is, because the two shall become one. Physically, spiritually, socially, whatever, financially, and so on. And there are occasions where you can assist in your husband's decision, add wisdom, lend wisdom, and whatever. Follow me? And not draw the line and say, hey, no, this is your decision, nothing to do with me. So the fact that the queen was there, she might have been instrumental in the king's immediate grant of his leave. And I set a time. And how long was he away? Actually, he was away for about 13 years. I think it's 12 years. He was away 12 years. Okay, you.
Such sleep.
You apply to be a cupbearer. Okay. You turn to chapter 5, verse 14. Chapter 5, verse 14. And this was after he has gone down to Jerusalem and rebuilt, and was in the process of rebuilding the walls, because he's still within the first 6 chapters. Yeah. And moreover, verse 14, moreover, from the time that I was appointed to be their governor in the land of Judah, from the 20th year until the 32nd year of King Artaxerxes. 20th year to the 32nd year, he was governor of the land of Judah. How many years is that? 12, right? Yeah. And that was 12 years. Yeah, spelled for you already. 12 years. Neither I or my brother, whatever. It's 12 years. And why only 12 years? Because after that, he returned to Babylon. But even then, for a short while. And then he came back later to Jerusalem. You follow me? So his first visit, first leave that he took was 12 years. I mean, to travel down already took 4 or 5 months. Okay. So why go back so fast? So, verse 7. Now, at this moment still, he was bold enough to ask, but at this moment, the king granted him the permission to go. But he wasn't a builder, right? No? He wasn't a blue-collar worker. He was a white-collar drinker. But he took that step of faith. He wasn't exactly a leader. He was just with the king. But still, he took that step of faith. Furthermore, I said to the king, if it pleases the king, let letters be given to me for the governors of the region beyond the river. Now, for the newcomers, this is the river. Okay? What river is this? The Euphrates. So beyond the river is this area. Okay? And beyond the river, this area, they were also under the territory of the Persians. And they had been quite hostile to Israel when Israel was trying to rebuild the temple. Right? And so, Nehemiah knew that. And if he were to just go straight from here, he is just going to end up facing opposition. So he is smart. So he asked his king for a letter so that these people will not bother him. And more than that, he also asked for resources because he needs timber and all these things, right? So he also asked, give me that letter so I can get the material. So, verse 7, furthermore, I said to the king, if it pleases the king, let letters of introduction be given to me for the governors of the region beyond the river, that they must permit me to pass through till I come to Judah. And a letter to Asaph, Jew, the keeper of the king's forest. King's forest, where is that? That he must give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel, which pertains to the temple, for the city wall, and for the house that I will occupy. Now, Lebanon is to the north of Israel, somewhere here. And what is Lebanon known for? The cedar. The trees, they are really tough. Okay? And we need them. We need them to build the beams and the doors and so on, the gates. And so, give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel, which pertains to the temple, for the city wall, for the house, and for the house that I will occupy. And which house is this? Historians say his family home. Because his family years ago were exiled to Babylon. But now that he is coming back, he believes, he knows that there is still a family home of his. And while he is there and doing the construction and so on, he has to stay somewhere, right? He needs to stay in his home. And his home must have been a bit run down. So he needs some material to rebuild it. How many of you have gone back to China? Gone back to your kampong? I've been back. Wow, that house. Wow, like as if the swordsman of olden days that can jump from roof to roof. And then there's a well there. So then my uncle there said, you can have this. I said, thank you very much. You can keep it. I'm not coming. Okay? But regret, I should have, a property price increased. Anyway, that was 1985 when I went. Okay, actually, when I went in 85, I told myself I'll never go back to China again. It was so, the people were a bit rough and rude and dirty, filthy. And I asked, can I go to the toilet? Can. My cousin brought me to the wall. I said, here? I said, yeah, this is a toilet. And it was facing the neighbor. Anyway, and the king granted them to me according to the good hand of my God upon me. So, in other words, God had a hand in him getting all this favor. The good hand of my God upon me. Now, Israel, if you remember, if you go and read Israel chapter 1, Israel chapter 6, chapter 7, and so on, you will notice Israel did not go back to Jerusalem empty-handed, right? He went back with metals, precious metals, and they will all have to be accounted for when they come into Jerusalem. So, they did not go back empty-handed. Neither did Nehemiah. And then, verse 9, he went back with an entourage, with imperial authority. That means he got horsemen and contingent with it, because he was an important man to the king. Then, I went to the governors in the region beyond the river and gave them the king's letters. Now the king had sent captains of the army and horsemen with me, like National Day Parade. When Sanballat, the Horonite, horrible guy, and Tobiah the Ammonite, the official heard of it, they were deeply disturbed that a man had come to seek the well-being of the children of Israel. Do you remember the names Sanballat and Tobiah? They were the same people who opposed Israel. Okay, you look at Ezra chapter 4. Let me see where the name. Where? Let me see. Okay, anyway, to save time, but when I find it, I'll show it to you. So, these people were opposing. And so when they heard and they saw, hey, this guy, Nehemiah, with a contingent coming and want to seek the well-being of the children of Israel, they were not happy. Now, who was Sanballat? Sanballat was the king or the governor, the one appointed by the Babylonians to take charge of the area around here. Okay, Sanballat he has authority over this area. If you read history books and so on, you will know. The Horonite. And Tobiah the Ammonite. Ammonite, where is Ammon? Ammon. Now, this is Jerusalem. And you know this river Jordan? The Ammonites are on the eastern side of the river Jordan. And so, these people, and if you go and study the early books from Genesis onwards, Leviticus and so on, the Ammonites actually have been very unkind to the people of Israel, even when they left Egypt. So they are just enemies of Israel. They just don't like Israel. So you have Sanballat and you have Tobiah, and they were deeply disturbed that Nehemiah came. Anyway, when Nehemiah came, verse 11, so I came to Jerusalem and was there 3 days. Then I arose in the night. Now, you notice, they came to Jerusalem and then rest 3 days, 3 nights before they start work. You look at Ezra chapter 8, verse 32. Ezra chapter 8, verse 32. So we came to Jerusalem, Ezra, and his 1,800 people, and stayed there 3 days. On the 4th day, then they went to present the silver, the gold, and everything else. Why 3 days? I don't know. Okay. 3, there could be some significance, whatever. But just for simple logic, after traveling 900 miles, 4 or 5 months, I think take 3 days break okay lah. Yeah. But same thing. This Nehemiah also took 3 days off. So then I arose, verse 12, in the night, I and a few men with me, I told no one what my God had put in my heart to do at Jerusalem. Nor was there any animal with me, except the one on which I rode. And I went out by night through the valley gate to the serpent well and the refuse gate, and viewed the walls of Jerusalem, which were broken down, and its gates, which were burned with fire. Now he just arrived. He didn't want any attention. He didn't want too many people gathered around him and oh, what's going on? Who are you? Why are you here? And so on and so forth. He wanted to go and inspect the walls, inspect the situation. Check the situation, appreciate the the conditions and so on before he makes his plans. And if you look at the diagram there, and I went out by night through the valley gate. Where's the valley gate? This gate which leads into the valley. So he went out at night by here to the serpent well. Where's the serpent well? And the refuge gate. Okay. Serpent well, I don't have it on this diagram, but the refuge gate is the down gate. Okay. So he has gone anti-clockwise, just to inspect the walls. And viewed the walls of Jerusalem, which were broken down, and its gates, which were burned with fire. Then I went on to the fountain gate, and to the king's pool, the water here, the pool of Shiloh and all this. We were here last year, or 2 years ago. But there was no room for the animal under me to pass. So, because you know why? A lot of rubbles, a lot of stones all over the place. So I went up in the night by the valley and viewed the walls. Then I turned back and entered by the valley gate, and so returned. So after he inspected just this and the king's pool, he turned around and he went back to the valley gate. And the officials did not know where I had gone or what I had done. I had not yet told the Jews, the priests, the nobles, the officials, or the others who did the work. Now, what was he doing? What was he doing? He was counting the cost before he began the project. You look at Luke chapter 48. Sorry, Luke 14, verse 28. Luke 14. Verse 28. For which of you, intending to build a tower, does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it, lest after he had laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, say, this man began to build and was not able to finish. Or what king, going to make war against another king, does not sit down first and consider what he is able with 10,000 to meet him, who comes against him with 20,000? Or else, while the other is still a great way off, he sends a delegation and asks conditions of peace. Basic message is count the cost before you begin. Instead of rushing to Jerusalem and straight away start building, maybe not all the walls need repairing. Maybe you don't have enough material. Maybe you brought the wrong material. You understand? Maybe you underestimated the number of people who need to work on the project. So you need to count the cost. I still remember some years ago, after the financial crisis, we went to KL. We thought, wow, we saw a lot of pillars in the city, unfinished project, all the MRT or LRT, whatever, just stopped work. They started building, then they just stopped work. And it stopped work, and they stopped for the longest time. Okay? So count the cost before you begin, otherwise they just be left there. So, verse 17. Then I said to them, so after he did his inspection, I believe the following day or whatever, he called for meeting. So he called for the people. Then I said to them, you see the distress that we are in. How Jerusalem lies waste, and its gates are burned with fire. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem, that we may no longer be a reproach. You know, reproach is very down, something negative spoken against you. It's very hurting. Let this not be a reproach anymore against us. And I told them of the hand of my God which had been good upon me, and also of the king's words that he had spoken to me. So what he was saying to them is, this situation is reversible. God has been with me. God sent me here. God stirred in my heart to rebuild this, and the king has given the permission, and the king has given the material, so we can reverse the situation. That's what he was saying. So they said, let us rise up and build. Then they set their hands to this good work. So the response was unanimous. But the Jews have a tendency to do this. When Moses came down from the mountain with the law, with the tablets and so on, they listened to the Lord. Then you know what they say? All that you say, we will do. But they did. But this time around, they did, in spite of opposition. But when Sanballat, the Horonite, Tobiah, the Ammonite official, and Geshem, the Arab, heard of it, they laughed at us and despised us and said, what is this thing that you are doing? Will you rebel against the king? You know who they were referring to? Artaxerxes. Will you rebel against the king Artaxerxes? Because Artaxerxes stopped the work in Israel. You know, we read just now. He stopped the work. And then you want to start rebuilding. But anyway, what they were trying to apply was the strategy of mockery, of ridicule. The first tactic the enemy will do is ridicule you, mock you, and so on. Are you sure? But anyway, for Bible study, I want to point you something else. Okay? So you know that Israel then and Israel now surrounded by enemies. Okay? So Sanballat, is beyond the river. This area, right? Okay. Now, then we have Tobiah. So Sanballat, I would say a bit north. Okay, a bit north this area. Then we have Tobiah, the Ammonite, a bit on the east. Okay. Then we have Geshem, the Arab. Where are they? Arabs are here, south. Okay. So they occupy the south. So you have Sanballat, somewhere in the north, the Tobiah, Ammonite, somewhere in the east, Geshem in the south. And they laughed at us and they despised us. So where was Israel? In the center. They were surrounded by enemies who mocked at them, who despised them. And it is the same today. Today Israel is still surrounded by enemies. Will you rebel against the king? So I answered them and said to them, the God of heaven himself will prosper us. Therefore we are his servants. No, therefore we his servants will arise and build. But you have no heritage or right or memorial in Jerusalem. That was his confidence in God. And I tell you, it helps a lot. I know I'm repeating myself, but in the year that was past, or 1.5 years, that I was besieged by all these problems and so on, the industry level. And people will come out of good intentions, say, hey, don't fight, you can't win. I said, my God will deliver us. And he did. Because you know why? Same God, the same God in Nehemiah, same God today. Okay? The God of heaven himself will prosper us. Therefore, we his servants will arise and build. But you have no heritage or right or memorial in Jerusalem. That means you don't even have the right to worship in Jerusalem. Anyway, you know them. Because you're not Jew. You got no right. When we rebuild this, this is for the Jews. And what God has started, he will see to his completion. You know Philippians 1:6. What God has started, he will see to his completion. Philippians 1:6. So our friend Nehemiah was not deflected, distracted, affected by the opposition. But he responded with full confidence in God. That's chapter 2.